The millionaire married a secret bride. But the truth changed everything. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. It was a cold Monday morning in New York City. The rain fell in thin silver lines against the tall glass windows of Hayes Innovations, one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. Inside the top floor office, Daniel Hayes, the 35-year-old millionaire CEO, was staring at a stack of documents that could decide the future of his empire. Daniel had built everything on his own, the company, the brand, and the reputation that made him both admired and feared in the business world. To the media, he was brilliant and untouchable. To his board of directors, he was the man who could turn any idea into gold. But behind those calm gray eyes was a man who had not known peace in years. He trusted no one, not after being betrayed by those closest to him. That morning, a quiet knock came at his door. His new assistant entered a young woman in a cream blouse and navy skirt, holding a folder close to her chest. Her name was Clara Wells. She spoke softly, her tone calm but confident. "Mr. Hayes, the presentation is ready for your signature." Daniel looked up briefly, expecting another nervous employee who could not meet his eyes. But this woman stood still, unshaken. There was something different about her, a quiet strength, a kind of honesty he had not seen in years. He took the folder without a word, signed it, and handed it back. But when their eyes met for a moment, something unfamiliar stirred in him, curiosity. That day, Clara did not know that the man sitting behind that polished desk would soon change the course of her life. And Daniel did not know that the woman standing before him carried a secret that could destroy everything he had built. Later that afternoon, the chaos of the day followed him into a meeting with investors. A damaging rumor had begun to spread that Daniel Hayes was not fit to run the company anymore, that he was reckless and too obsessed with control. The board demanded a solution. "You need to show stability, Daniel," his attorney advised. "The public needs to see that you are not a machine that you can love, that you can commit. Sometimes, an image of a happy marriage can save more than a press release." Daniel almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You are suggesting that I get married to fix my reputation?" "Not a real marriage," the lawyer replied. "A contract, discreet, temporary." That night, Daniel poured himself a glass of bourbon and stared out at the glittering skyline. He hated the idea. He had never believed in love, much less in pretending to have it. But he also knew that if he did nothing, he could lose everything he had fought for. His mind drifted back to the quiet assistant with the steady gaze, the one who did not flinch under pressure, who seemed immune to power. He remembered how she spoke, clear and calm, never trying to please him. For reasons he could not explain, her face stayed in his thoughts. The next morning, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. He called Clara into his office. She entered, holding her tablet, unaware of what was coming. He looked at her directly and said, "Miss Wells, I need your help with something unusual." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. What kind of help?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I need a wife. Not a real one, just for show." The room went silent. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "It is a business arrangement. 3 months. You will be well compensated. You will not owe me anything beyond appearances." Clara felt her pulse quicken. She had only been here for 3 weeks, yet now the most powerful man in the company was asking her to marry him, even if only on paper. She hesitated, torn between fear and a strange curiosity. "And what happens when the contract ends?" Daniel's gaze hardened. "When it ends, we go back to being strangers." End of 5. Neither of them realized that this deal, meant to protect reputations and money, would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about love, truth, and loyalty. Because sometimes, even the most carefully written contracts cannot protect the heart. Clara Wells could hardly believe what she had agreed to. Less than 24 hours after that strange conversation in Daniel Hayes' office, she was now standing in front of a lawyer, signing the pages of a marriage contract. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper felt unreal. Daniel sat beside her, calm as ever, wearing his perfectly tailored suit and the same distant expression he used in board meetings. To him, this was business, another deal to close. To her, it was something far more complicated. The agreement was clear: a 3-month marriage for public image, no emotional involvement, no interference in each other's personal lives, and complete confidentiality. After 3 months, they would quietly separate and both would move on. When the lawyer left the room, Daniel turned to her. His voice was low, controlled. "This will be easy as long as we both follow the rules. Appearances are everything. I will arrange the public events. You only need to be by my side and play the part." Clara nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good," he said. "And one more thing, do not lie to the media. Ever. If you do not know the answer, stay silent." She met his eyes, steady but unsure. "What about lying to each other?" Daniel hesitated for the first time, then replied, "That will not be necessary. We already know what this is." Their first public appearance came sooner than expected. The following weekend, Daniel attended a charity gala at the Metropolitan Grand Hotel. Cameras flashed as they walked in, hand in hand. Clara wore a silver gown chosen by a stylist, her hair swept into an elegant bun. Daniel's hand rested lightly on her back, his touch formal but protective. To the world, they looked perfect, the brilliant millionaire and his graceful new bride. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Hayes, when did you get married? Is it true you fell in love at work?" Daniel smiled for the cameras, answering smoothly, "Sometimes love finds you when you are too busy to look for it." The crowd laughed, charmed by his words. Clara stood beside him, smiling softly, though her heart pounded. Inside the ballroom, music filled the air. Under the glow of chandeliers, Daniel whispered, "You handled that well." "I have had practice pretending," she said quietly. He glanced at her, sensing something behind her words, but said nothing more. Days turned into weeks. The fake marriage became a routine shared breakfast for the photographers, polite smiles during interviews, and separate rooms at night. Daniel remained focused on his company, rarely speaking more than necessary. Yet sometimes, in unguarded moments, his eyes lingered on her a little too long. One night, after a charity dinner, they returned home exhausted. Clara slipped off her shoes, carrying them through the marble hallway. Daniel followed behind, still in his tuxedo, his tie loosened. "You should not walk barefoot on cold floors," he said. She turned slightly. "You care about appearances, not about my feet," he frowned. "Maybe both." It was a small exchange, but something shifted in the silence that followed. For the first time, Daniel noticed how her laughter softened the walls of the house that had always felt like a museum. For the first time, Clara saw that beneath his armor of control was a man who had forgotten how to be cared for. Still, the rules of their contract hung between them like invisible chains. No feelings, no questions, no mistakes. Yet every morning, when Daniel found her in the kitchen making coffee, instead of waiting for the staff, he felt a warmth he could not explain. And every evening, when Clara saw the exhaustion in his eyes after another battle in the boardroom, she wanted to say something kind, but she never dared. Each day brought them closer, and each rule they followed pushed them further toward breaking the one rule they could not afford to break. Because somewhere between the smiles for the cameras and the long, quiet nights, their hearts had already started to forget that this was just a deal. The first month of their contract passed in silence and precision. Every day felt like a scene rehearsed too well. Daniel Hayes, the man who once measured life in numbers and profit margins, now found himself counting the seconds of quiet that filled the mansion after midnight. Clara Wells had become part of his daily routine, but not in the way he expected. She worked beside him with quiet discipline, never asking for anything, never showing what she truly felt. She fulfilled every condition of the agreement, yet somehow, she made the vast penthouse feel less like a fortress and more like a home. One Friday evening, Daniel came home later than usual. The rain outside had turned heavy, and thunder echoed through the glass walls. Clara was sitting on the couch, reading. A soft light glowed above her, turning the room into a painting. For a brief moment, Daniel forgot about the board meetings, the investors, and the press. He saw only her peaceful, real, untouched by ambition. "You are still awake," he said quietly. She smiled. "Someone has to make sure you remember to eat dinner." He looked at the table. A bowl of warm soup waited, steam rising slowly. He hesitated, then sat down across from her. "You do not have to do this," he said. "I know," she replied, but I wanted to. For a man who trusted no one, her words hit deeper than he expected. They ate in silence, but something in the air had changed, the kind of change that no contract could explain. Over the next few days, the walls between them began to shift. Daniel started to notice small things, the way Clara's hair fell loose when she worked late, the quiet hum of her voice when she focused, the calm she carried wherever she went. She, in turn, began to see through his armor the man who still called his late mother's phone number once a year, the man who stayed in the office until midnight not because he loved work, but because he feared loneliness. One morning, during a routine press event, a journalist asked a question that caught Clara off guard. "Mrs. Hayes, what made you fall in love with your husband?" For a moment, she froze. There was no script for that. Then she looked at Daniel. His expression was calm, but his eyes, they were asking for something honest. She smiled softly and said, "He works harder than anyone I have ever known. But sometimes, even the strongest people need someone to remind them they are human." And the room went silent. Daniel did not move, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise, gratitude, maybe even admiration. Later that night, as they returned home, he said, "You did not have to say that." "I did not lie," she replied. From that night, the tension between them grew in a way neither could control. Their conversations became longer, their silences softer. Daniel began walking her to the car in the mornings, and Clara started leaving notes on his desk reminding him to eat. But where there is warmth, there is fear. They both knew that emotions had no place in a contract. Love was not part of the agreement. One evening, Daniel found Clara standing by the balcony, her hair moving gently in the wind, the city lights reflected in her eyes. He said quietly, "Sometimes I forget this is fake." Clara turned toward him, her voice almost a whisper. "Maybe it stopped being fake the moment we both cared." He did not answer. He simply stood there beside her, looking out over the skyline that stretched endlessly into the night. For the first time in years, Daniel Hayes felt something real, something he could neither buy nor control. And that feeling, fragile and dangerous, was about to test every rule they had sworn to keep. Autumn came early that year. The city outside Daniel Hayes' penthouse turned golden, and the air carried the quiet chill that made even the strongest hearts feel restless. Inside the mansion, life moved in a rhythm neither of them dared to define. The contract still had a month left, but both Daniel and Clara Wells knew something had already changed. Their relationship no longer felt like an arrangement. They still acted for the cameras, still posed as the perfect couple when the press followed them, but when the doors closed, there was warmth that did not belong to any contract. Daniel found reasons to linger near her desk. Clara started waiting for him at dinner. Their words remained simple, but their silence had grown full of meaning. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. He looked exhausted, his shoulders tense under his suit jacket. Clara was waiting in the living room, reading through a set of notes. "Another board meeting?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Another argument. Sometimes I wonder if they see me as a man or just a wallet that keeps the company alive." "Otto, you cannot expect them to understand what it cost you to build all this," she said, her tone calm but caring. He looked at her for a moment. "And what do you think it cost me?" She met his eyes. "Everything that made you human." Daniel's lips parted, but no words came. For years, people had praised his strength, his power, his genius. No one had ever seen the loneliness underneath. Clara did. He poured himself a glass of bourbon and sat beside her. The sound of the rain against the windows filled the silence. After a while, he asked, "Do you ever wonder what will happen when this is over?" Clara hesitated. "I try not to." "Why?" "Because it will hurt either way." He turned to look at her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "You are the only person who speaks to me like that." "Maybe that is because I do not work for you when the cameras are off," she said quietly. For a moment, he reached out as if to touch her hand, but stopped himself. The air between them was heavy with everything they were not allowed to say. A few days later, Daniel invited her to accompany him to a private investors retreat upstate. It was supposed to be business, but the estate was surrounded by trees painted in gold and red, and the setting sun gave the place an almost dreamlike glow. They walked by the lake after the meetings ended, the reflection of the sky shimmering on the surface. "It is strange," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "I used to think success meant never needing anyone. And now?" she asked. "Now I am not so sure." Clara stopped walking. "Do you regret this?" He turned toward her, confused. Regret what? This us. The contract. The lie. Daniel took a breath. It was supposed to be a lie, yes. But somewhere along the way, I started wishing it was not. Her heart pounded. The wind carried his words softly, as if the world itself wanted to hold them still. Daniel, she began. But before she could continue, his phone rang sharply. He answered, his tone shifting back to the cold, focused CEO. What do you mean there has been a breach? Clara's stomach tightened. She stepped closer as Daniel ended the call, his face pale. There has been a leak, he said. Someone accessed the Helios files. Do they know who? They are tracing the login now, he replied. That night, Daniel barely spoke. He paced the room while Clara sat quietly, trying to calm the storm in her chest. What she did not know was that someone from the rival company had sent her a fake internal survey weeks earlier, a phishing email disguised as a company form. She had filled it out, believing it came from the IT department. That was how her credentials were stolen, how her login became the weapon used against Daniel. Now, as Daniel stood by the window, anger and disbelief on his face, Clara whispered to herself, please, do not let them find it. The following morning, Daniel's security director brought him the report. His expression hardened as he read the name. He looked up slowly, disbelief turning to fury. Clara Wells, he said quietly. It was her. She walked into the room just as he spoke the words. Their eyes met, and everything they had built began to crumble. The next morning, the mansion that had once felt warm now carried the sharp, cold silence of disbelief. Daniel Hayes stood in his office, holding the security report in one hand, his knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. His name, his company, his life's work, all of it hung on the thin thread of trust. And now that thread had been cut, across the room, Clara Wells waited near the doorway, her heart pounding. She had seen the way Daniel looked at her when he spoke her name, as if every piece of trust between them had turned to dust. Tell me it is not true, he said, his voice low but trembling with anger. Clara took a step forward. Daniel, please listen to me. I did not take anything, I swear. He slammed the report on the desk. Your login was used to access the Helios files. The same files my competitors have been trying to steal for years. And now you expect me to believe this is an accident? Clara's throat tightened. Someone must have used my credentials. I would never betray you. Daniel's eyes hardened. You have already betrayed me. He turned away, his jaw clenched. The air between them felt too heavy to breathe. Clara wanted to tell him everything about the fake email, about her father, about how she had been caught between loyalty and love, but the truth sounded too impossible, too late. Finally, Daniel spoke again, colder than before. I trusted you more than anyone. I let you into my home, into my life. I made you my wife in front of the world. And this is what I get in return, humiliation. Clara's eyes filled with tears. It was never about your company or your money. I came here because I wanted to help you. Because I... Stop, he snapped. Do not lie to me again. She froze. For the first time since she had met him, Daniel's expression was not just angry, it was wounded. You will leave tonight, he said quietly. The contract is over. Her voice trembled. You are not even going to hear the truth? I have heard enough truth for a lifetime. Daniel walked out, leaving her standing alone. The soft light from the window fell across the wedding photo on the shelf, the image of two people smiling for the cameras, unaware that their lie had turned into the only truth they could not face. By evening, Clara packed her things into a single suitcase. Every step echoed like a goodbye. She stopped at his office door. He was sitting at his desk, staring into the dark. Daniel, she said softly. He did not look up. You should go. She took a breath. Before I do, there is something you should know. I am not who you think I am. He lifted his eyes slowly. You are the woman who destroyed everything I built. Her heart cracked at his words. My father is Henry Wells, the man who tried to ruin your company. He sent me to spy on you, but I could not do it. The breach, the stolen data, that was not me. Someone used my login. I tried to warn your team weeks ago, but no one listened. Oba. Daniel's face went pale, but his pride would not let him show doubt. You had every reason to lie now. She stepped closer. I had every reason to betray you, but I did not. I stayed because I loved you. He said nothing. Silence filled the room until it felt unbearable. Then he whispered, you should leave before I remember why I let you stay. When the door closed behind her, Daniel's composure shattered. He swept the papers from his desk, the glass of bourbon crashing to the floor. The sound filled the empty house, but it could not drown out the echo of her last words. Outside, rain poured over the city. Inside, two hearts broke, one from pride, the other from pain. The following weeks dragged on like an endless winter. The press discovered the scandal almost immediately. News outlets called it the Hayes betrayal. Headlines spread across every business page, painting Daniel Hayes as a man blinded by love and careless with his empire. Investors panicked, partners withdrew, contracts were canceled overnight. For the first time since he had founded Hayes Innovations, Daniel watched his company tremble beneath the weight of rumors. He attended meeting after meeting, trying to hold it together, but nothing silenced the whispers. At night, the mansion that once echoed with laughter now stood empty and cold. The lights stayed on, but the warmth was gone. The faint scent of her perfume still lingered in the hallway, and every time he passed the kitchen, he could almost see her there smiling softly, offering him a cup of coffee. But that image had become a ghost he could not face. He buried himself in work, chasing numbers and deadlines as if they could erase the memory of her eyes. Yet every quiet moment betrayed him. He kept hearing her voice, the calm steadiness with which she had said, "I stayed because I loved you." Daniel told himself it was a lie, but something inside him refused to let go. One evening, his closest advisor, Mark Ellison, came into his office. "Daniel, you need to see this," Mark said, placing a folder on the desk. Inside were security logs and timestamps, all from the night of the data breach. "Your system administrator found something odd," Mark continued. "The login from Clara's account was used, yes, but the IP address was traced to an external server, not from inside the mansion, and not from any of her devices. Whoever did this masked their location." Daniel's brow furrowed. "You are saying she might not have done it?" Mark nodded. "The breach came from someone else, probably hired by a competitor, but Clara's credentials were copied weeks earlier. She tried to lock them, but she did not have the authority to reset them." Daniel sat back, speechless. His pulse quickened as pieces of memory began to realign her warnings about the company's security. The late nights when she stayed up reviewing files, her anxious looks when the rumors began. And then he remembered her last words before leaving, "I had every chance to destroy you, but I chose to protect you." A heavy silence filled the room. Daniel's anger collapsed beneath a wave of realization she had been telling the truth all along. "Find her," he said quietly. Mark frowned. "Do you mean Clara?" "Yes," Daniel said, his voice firm. "Find out where she went." For days, he heard nothing. Then one morning, Mark entered again, holding an article from a small local newspaper. The headline read, "Wells Foundation launches shelter for families in crisis." In the photo, Clara stood among volunteers, her expression tired but peaceful. Daniel's throat tightened as he read the caption. She had gone back to her old name, dedicating herself to a charity that had once belonged to her late mother, the very foundation his company had once cut funding from during a merger. He whispered to himself, "She saved my company, and I destroyed her world." I? That night, Daniel went to the roof of the building that bore his name. The city stretched below, glittering, cold, and distant. For years, it had been his kingdom. But at that moment, it only felt like a reminder of everything he had lost. He thought about her laugh, her honesty, her quiet strength. He thought about how he had judged her not by her actions, but by his fear of betrayal. In the weeks that followed, Daniel began making quiet changes. He fired the executive who had leaked the initial story to the media. He reinstated the Wells Foundation as an official partner of Hayes Innovations, this time under his personal sponsorship. Still, none of it eased the guilt that lingered in his chest. One evening, as he reviewed company reports, he stopped on the final page, a quote she had once written on a sticky note and left on his desk. "Trust is not built by perfection, but by truth. 7. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since she had left, Daniel allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had done. He had lost the one woman who had never wanted his money, his fame, or his empire. She had wanted his trust. And now that he finally understood her, it was too late, or at least that was what he thought. Because in Millionaire Stories, the truth has a way of returning when you least expect it. And the truth was already on its way back to him. The morning air was cold when Daniel Hayes finally made his decision. The city outside was waking up, but for him, the sleepless nights had never ended. He stood by the window of his office, watching the sun rise over New York. The same skyline that once represented victory now looked like a reminder of every mistake he had made. For weeks, he had lived with the truth. Clara Wells had not betrayed him. She had saved him, and he had thrown her away. The guilt ate at him more than any business loss ever could. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the day," he said firmly, "and prepare the car. I'm going to the Wells Foundation." The drive to the foundation took almost an hour. When Daniel arrived, the contrast was stark. There were no glass towers or polished marble floors here, just an old red brick building filled with people who needed help. Volunteers moved with quiet purpose, handing out boxes of food, helping children with schoolwork, comforting families who had lost everything. And there, at the center of it all, was Clara. She was wearing a simple blue cardigan, her hair tied back, no makeup, no luxury, no spotlight, and yet she looked more at peace than he had ever seen her. Daniel stood at the doorway for a long moment, unable to move. Every memory of her voice, her kindness, her courage returned all at once. Finally, he took a breath and stepped inside. The sound of his shoes on the floor caught her attention. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes widened slightly, but she did not speak. "Clara," he said softly, "you look well." She stood still, her tone calm but distant. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" He hesitated, the words heavy in his throat. "I came to say I am sorry." The room fell quiet. Even the volunteers nearby seemed to pause. Daniel continued, his voice lower now. "I destroyed the one thing that ever truly mattered. I accused you without proof. I let my pride decide what my heart already knew." Clara looked at him for a long time, her eyes full of sadness. "You had every reason to doubt me," she said gently. "I hid the truth about my family. I should have told you who I really was." "No," Daniel said. "You tried to protect me. You told me, and I did not believe you. I do not expect forgiveness, but I had to tell you that I know the truth now. The breach was not you. It was one of my own executives. You were innocent the whole time." Clara's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "It does not change what happened between us." "I know," Daniel said quietly, "but maybe it can change what happens next." He handed her a folder. Inside was a legal document. "This is the official partnership agreement between Hayes Innovations and the Wells Foundation. I want to rebuild what my company took from your mother's legacy. No contracts, no publicity, just support." She glanced down at the papers, then back at him. "Why are you really doing this?" "Because it is what you would have done," he said. "Because I finally understand what it means to love someone without expecting anything in return." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried everything they had lost and everything they still could regain. Clara closed the folder slowly. "You have changed, Daniel." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I am finally becoming the man you thought I was." Before he left, she said softly, "You cannot fix the past, Daniel." "I know," he replied, "but I can make sure the future is built on truth this time." He turned to go, but her voice stopped him. "Daniel." He looked back. "Thank you," she said quietly. That one word, simple, honest, felt like the first ray of light after a storm. As he stepped outside, the wind brushed against his face, and for the first time in years, Daniel Hayes felt something he had forgotten how to feel: peace. He had lost the woman he loved, but he had found his soul again. And maybe, just maybe, destiny was not finished writing their story. 2 months passed after Daniel Hayes visited the Wells Foundation. The partnership between his company and the foundation began quietly but grew quickly. It was not a publicity stunt or a move to restore his image. For once in his life, Daniel worked without expecting applause. Every project that carried the foundation's name reminded him of Clara, of her kindness, her strength, and the truth that had once shattered them both. The press began to notice the change. Business magazines called him the reformed millionaire. But for Daniel, the headlines meant nothing. What mattered was that, for the first time, his success did not feel empty. Still, one thing remained undone: the apology that words alone could not heal. It was a Sunday afternoon when fate brought them together again. Clara was speaking at a charity conference presenting a new project funded by Hayes Innovations. Daniel arrived quietly, sitting near the back. He watched her on stage, confident and graceful, her voice steady as she spoke about rebuilding trust between corporations and communities. When the event ended, the crowd applauded. As people began to leave, Clara looked across the room and saw him. Their eyes met for the first time in weeks. She froze for a moment, then slowly walked toward him. "Daniel," she said softly. I did not expect to see you here. He smiled faintly. I wanted to see the woman who managed to change an entire industry without needing a boardroom or a contract. She looked down for a second, a small, hesitant smile forming on her lips. You always did have a way with words. End of 4. I used to, he said. Now I am just trying to speak honestly. There was a pause, gentle but full of the weight of everything they had been through. Clara, he continued, when I accused you, I was not protecting my company. I was protecting my pride. I thought trusting someone made me weak, but you proved that the opposite is true. You were stronger than I ever was. Her expression softened. You were hurt, Daniel. You built your life around control. It is not easy to let someone in after that. He nodded. Maybe, but I hurt the only person who ever believed in me without expecting anything in return. That is something I will always regret. She looked at him quietly for a long moment. You do not have to carry that forever, she said gently. I forgave you a long time ago. The words hit him harder than he expected. He blinked, trying to process them. You did? Yes, she said. Anger keeps people chained to the past. I could not move forward while still holding on to it, and I wanted both of us to move forward. Daniel took a deep breath. Then maybe there is a chance we can begin again, not as a deal, not as a contract, but as two people who finally understand each other. Clara's eyes searched his, and in them, he saw the same sincerity that had once made him fall in love without realizing it. You know, she said softly, it is funny how the truth can destroy one life and rebuild another. Daniel smiled. The truth changed everything just like you said it would. For the first time, they both laughed, not out of joy, but out of relief. The storm that had torn them apart had finally passed. As they walked out together, the afternoon sun painted the city in gold. People around them moved in the rhythm of a new day, unaware that two lives had just found peace again. Daniel glanced at Clara, his voice calm and sure. Whatever comes next, I will not make the same mistake twice. She looked ahead, her smile soft but certain. Then we both learned something worth keeping. They walked side by side down the quiet street, no longer haunted by what had been, but quietly hopeful for what could still be. Because sometimes forgiveness does not erase the past, it simply opens the door to a future built on truth. A full year had passed since the truth brought Daniel Hayes and Clara Wells back together. What began as a story of betrayal had turned into one of redemption, growth, and quiet understanding. The partnership between Hayes Innovations and the Wells Foundation had flourished. Together, they had rebuilt communities, opened shelters for struggling families, and created programs that gave people a second chance, just like the second chance they had found for themselves. The press had stopped calling Daniel the fallen millionaire and started referring to him as the man who rebuilt his empire with heart. But for Daniel, none of the headlines mattered. What mattered was that Clara was part of his life again, not through a contract, but through trust. The spring gala arrived the 1-year anniversary of the foundation's success. The event was held at the same hotel where Daniel and Clara had once posed as a fake couple for the cameras. Tonight, however, there were no lies, no pretense, only truth. As the orchestra played softly, Daniel stood near the stage, watching Clara greet guests. She moved with quiet grace, smiling warmly, listening to every person as if they were the only one in the room. He had watched her do this for months, lead with compassion, not control, and every time it reminded him how she had changed him without ever trying to. When she turned and caught his gaze, she smiled in that gentle way he would never forget. Daniel walked toward her slowly. The noise of the crowd faded until all he could hear was his own heartbeat. You look like someone who finally found what he was searching for, Clara said softly. I did, Daniel replied, but it was never what I expected. It was who. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. You still have that way with words, Mr. Hayes. Not words, he said, just truth. Oh. He reached into his pocket, and for a moment, her breath caught. Inside his hand was a small velvet box, the same deep blue as the night sky outside. He opened it slowly, revealing a simple gold ring, elegant and timeless. Clara's eyes widened. Daniel. He took a steady breath. A year ago, I asked you to marry me for business. Tonight, I am asking because I cannot imagine a life without you. No contracts, no lies, no conditions, just love, built on everything we learned the hard way. All tears welled in her eyes as she looked at him, unable to speak. The memory of their first wedding, the cameras, the cold smiles, the false vows flashed in her mind. But this moment was nothing like that. There were no reporters, no audiences, no expectations, just two people who had walked through pain and found peace together. Clara whispered, "Are you sure this is what you want, after everything?" Daniel smiled gently. "It is everything I never knew I needed." End of. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. The ballroom went quiet as people around them realized what was happening. Then, a soft wave of applause spread through the room, followed by the delicate sound of the orchestra shifting to a slower melody. Clara blinked back her tears. "You know, this time, I think it is real." Daniel smiled. "It always was. We just had to lose everything to understand what it meant." Huh. They moved on to the dance floor as the lights dimmed, the city glowing beyond the glass walls. The music wrapped around them, and, for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped, as if every mistake, every heartbreak, had led exactly here. Daniel whispered, "The truth changed everything, Clara, but it also gave me the only thing I ever truly wanted you." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice quiet but full of warmth. "Then let us never go back to pretending again." Huh. Outside, the night sky shimmered with the reflection of city lights, and inside, two people who once loved under false promises now stood together, bound by honesty, forgiveness, and a love that was finally real. Because in Millionaire Stories, the richest hearts are not the ones that own everything, they are the ones that learn how to begin again.